I think TechCore is uniquely positioned to have its finger on the pulse of the schools and the pulse of the industry.
And I'll never forget, they ran a cover story, black and white. And the headline was America's Shame. And what was happening was people were just dumping computers into classrooms with no instruction. And the takeaway from the article was, the first stop is not the desk with the computer. It's got to be getting the teacher committed.
There's also a great opportunity in all of those hours where students are outside of school.
Yeah.
And I think, TechCore and partnering with nonprofits and other youth-serving organizations, being able to think about what are those times, whether it's after school or in the summer, that we can also get great content to students. It's going to take all of us.
Welcome to the Founders Focus Podcast, an open conversation with TechCore founder Gary Beach and those who care about the future of technology. For 30 years, TechCore has worked to close the opportunity gap in technology by delivering high-quality, career-connected programs to K-12 students and educators. Founders Focus invites you along for the journey as we examine technology and how it impacts the way we work and live.
Welcome to Season 4, Episode 2 of TechCore's Founders Focus podcast series. My name is Gary Beach. I'm founder of TechCore, and today I will host a podcast discussion with Karen Smith and Lisa Chambers, two visionary leaders who both were there at the inception of TechCore 30 years ago, and who today will share their personal stories, insights, and passion for the organization with our audience, while also discussing TechCore's future strategy and vision. Let's meet our guests. In 1995, Karen Smith joined TechCore as founding executive director, where for a decade she leveraged her energy, vision, and can-do spirit to lead TechCore in its formative years, including launching the organization as a 501c3 nonprofit from the Roosevelt Room of the White House, joined by President Clinton. In 2004, Karen joined the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future as Chief Operating Officer, while continuing to advise TechCore as a key member of the organization's executive board for 20 years, retiring in 2024. Our second guest is Lisa Chambers. Lisa is CEO of TechCore and has over 2 decades of expertise in building cross-sector alliances and leading nationally recognized award-winning technology programs for K-12 students and educators. Her strategic vision and dedication to closing the opportunity gap in technology have positioned TechCore as a driving force in transforming technology education nationwide. Welcome again, Karen and Lisa. It's a pleasure to be sitting down with you here telephonically, having known each other, 30 plus years, to talk about not only how, and you two were so seminal to the formation of TechCore, the stories, the vision, the challenges that you shared back then. But I think equally important, perhaps even more important, is to frame it for our listeners in terms of what the future looks like. What are the goals and the aspirations there? Because we have lots of stories we can talk about here, and what I'm hoping is that we'll create another story as we go through. So first, I'd like to chat with you a bit about the founding stories. How was it? This was a bolt of lightning come down and say, this is the technology commandments, and this is what it's about. What was, Karen, I'll start with you. What inspired you to embark on your journey with TechCore?
Well, I would say it wasn't a bolt of lightning. It was a bolt of Gary Beach. My background is in education. I taught second grade until our own kids were born. And after 16 years, when I came back into education, it was as an administrator tasked with bringing the schools in one particular district together with its community. And that's when I first learned about the power of those kinds of partnerships, but also the challenge of partnerships between partners who spoke a different language. Um, so when Gary, you presented your vision of, wow, let's bring technology volunteers into the schools. Well, it fit my passions. And I knew that in TechCore, we could create a bridge, we could create a connector across that divide. And by doing that, we could unleash a tremendous resource for our schools. So I was excited by Gary's vision of bringing technology folks and schools together. And I saw the potential if we could just create the process for it.
You were working at the time when we first met, weren't you, at the Mass Software Council?
Yes, I was.
And you came into my office trying to get Computer World, the newspaper I was working on, to print your booklet as pro bono. And sitting on my desk was literally a pile of emails. You remember the email back in 94 or 95 was not as prevalent as it was now. It's going on anyway now. But there were about 1,000 emails, people all around the world. I'd ask them, what do you think of TechCore? And you were a lot more excited about it than I was because I had this business to run and so we printed the book, I think, for you. But the lasting thing was our friendship and your vision, to let's take this and take it to the next step, which I think thousands and tens of thousands of people are eternally grateful. Lisa, what inspired you? We first met when Karen was hosting, I think it was a state's meeting someplace in Washington, and you walk in and bubbly, visionary, can do, and just impressed everybody. But what was your inspiration point?
Well, Gary, before I answer that question, I have to go back to your comment about you having printed out emails on your desk because I am old enough to remember when people did that, but a lot of our listeners might not remember that in the early days of email, a lot of folks printed them out, responded to them. And
Yes. And Gary walked around with that pile also.
I was grateful to get rid of it, Karen. You were there. But uh, before you joined to run the Ohio chapter, what was your take? What was your aha? This is something I want to do, hopefully for the rest of your life.
and for me, it really was a vision, Gary. Prior to joining TechCore in Ohio, I was working for a nonprofit organization, and this in one of Columbus's most challenged neighborhoods, lots of poverty, lots of crime. And I had been working with this nonprofit to run a program called Weed and Seed. And the idea behind the nonprofit was that you weed out negative elements in communities, but then you must seed them with positive opportunities. And this was in the mid 90s. And so technology and the internet, those were all still very new things. And in this community, we stood up one of the first computer labs. And so I feel what brought me to TechCore was the group of fourth and fifth graders who would get out of school and who would run to get to our computer lab so that they could get online on this thing called the World Wide Web. And they could see and experience things that they would not have been able to do, right? For a lot of the kids that we worked with, their world consisted of the 8 blocks in this community. And so now with this technology, they were able to have experiences and see things and engage with things. And for me, that's when the light bulb went off about how powerful technology could be for kids and communities. And so when that project came to an end and I heard about TechCore, I was clear that this is where I'm supposed to go.
So those faces you see on the website still to this day, 30 years later. I mean, you can be having a bad day, just go onto the TechCore website. I guarantee you spend 5 minutes there, you're going to walk away with smiles on your face.
Yeah.
But besides the vision, it's not easy to start something. And Karen, what were some of the key challenges that you faced? I remember we in the snowy area of Worcester, Massachusetts in January, it's freezing cold, and we're bringing these first volunteers in, and uh, I don't know if that was a challenge or not, but what was some of the challenges you faced? And at least I'd like to hear from you on that too. Karen?
Well, I think early on there were two, and remember this was the early to mid 90s, so things were a lot different. Um, and I think there were really two big challenges that uh, I felt needed to be addressed in order to bring this vision to life. And one was to create and model the process of what this would look like. Um, because as I said, people were used to talking two different languages. Schools were used to businesses getting in their business and telling them what to do. And so what would it mean to partner a community and its its businesses and its people with the schools? And I think the second one, and this really would keep me up at night, is how would we reach rural areas?
Hmm.
Because the vision of bringing technology volunteers into schools, no, we could build that process. We could model that. But what do you do when you're out in the rural areas where there aren't these folks? So, um, two early things that helped us to create and model the process. One was we incubated it in Massachusetts. We built the processes that would help and facilitate two entities that talked like this now could talk like this. So we incubated that thanks to the leadership of the Massachusetts Software Council providing that incubator space, and then they're launching us and giving us the freedom to go out and build it across the country. Um, and the second piece of modeling it was an initiative that was called CyberEd, which dropped into our laps early on. It was a partnership between the White House and a half a dozen tech and telecom companies. It was led by MCI. Um, and we took an 18-wheeler across the country to 15 cities. People often ask, did I drive it? And I said, no, I couldn't reach the pedals. I organized it, but we hired a team of teachers to go onto this truck that was outfitted with a computer lab and a video conferencing center. And we took it into 15 cities, um, and it would spend a week. And during the day, we would bring teachers onto the truck to show them, give them the opportunity to touch and see and learn about what technology could do to facilitate their teaching. Um, they had no clue. Computers were being dropped in around the country, and teachers had no idea what to do with them, nor how to use them. Um, and so we would give them the opportunity to see and touch and learn about the power of technology in their teaching. But equally important, we brought local businesses and government leaders onto the truck so that they could see it too. And then we ended each week in each of these 15 cities with a roundtable where we brought these leaders together and challenged them to come to the table so that the truck didn't just deliver a carrot that they couldn't reach, but it left behind a footprint of teachers who felt empowered, business leaders, government leaders who understood how they could step up to be part of this. And it was that early modeling of what a collaboration might look like that was important in those early days. When it came to the second challenge of reaching rural areas, it came a couple of years later, I would say 2 years later, when we launched Web Teacher. And that was in partnership with the cable industry. It was an online self-paced tutorial that was developed by teachers and for teachers. And it was accessible to anyone who could get online. Now, that was a challenge to get online back in those days. But if you get online, Web Teacher could walk teachers through a self-paced tutorial that would help guide them into what they could do. Second program that helped us to reach the rural areas was an early program called Text for Schools. We created virtual working groups of 10 people. 5 of them were educators, 5 of them were tech professionals that represented the spectrum of expertise needed to answer technology questions. And in a safe, knowledgeable space, the educators could ask questions, sometimes answered by other educators, sometimes answered by the technology expert. And when a technology expert would say, "Oh, you should try this," there were 4 other technology experts to say, "Yeah, and in addition, you could do this," or "Maybe you should try this instead." And they would have this dialogue across the technology and education space that was a safe and knowledgeable space. That was important to everybody, particularly to the rural schools
Sure.
didn't have access. So
I'm
those
taking
were
a
our
listen.
early challenges.
This got to be a book here someplace on all these stories. Uh, One thing I just would like to amend on append to Karen's comments. During those early 90s days, I was working at a publishing company and had a magazine called Macworld. And I'll never forget, they ran a cover story, black and white, and the headline was America's Shame. And what was happening was people were just dumping computers into classrooms with no instruction. And the takeaway from the article was, the first stop is not the desk with the computer. It's got to be getting the teacher committed. And that to this day, Lisa, that's a core value of the success of TechCore. Do you have any founding stories before we move on to the next question?
No, I would just, I mean, I think what you just shared was really important because I think purchasing hardware was the first step. But a lot of us thought that if we put hardware in schools, then all of a sudden our students and our teachers would have everything that they needed. And it was clear that it took a lot more than that. And I think that TechCore came in at the right time, with the right philosophy, that it was about more than equipment, that it was making sure that our teachers had the support and the training, to do that. And I think the other thing that Karen shared, which is so important and really a part of, in Ohio, we started, several years, 4 years, I think, after you all launched TechCore. So we had the opportunity to learn from the lessons learned, and also had a playbook, right? And I think one of the pieces that Karen shared, which was so important, is that helping volunteers and educators understand how to work together to solve those problems that our schools were facing, and putting them through adequate training. And I think we did a really great job here in Ohio in building a really strong training model, for our volunteers, where our volunteers and our schools left at the end of that night after that training, feeling that it was more than just a passion project, that they were actually going to get something done, that they walked out with their contract, if you will, about what their project was going to be, a timeline, everything, and a lot of that is, that whole model was thanks to Pat Barron, and her leadership, of the Ohio chapter, in understanding how important it is. You get volunteers, they have lots of passion, but you also need to kind of focus that, to make sure that at the end of those experiences, folks said, yeah, we actually got some good stuff done, because they definitely did here.
And here we are 30 years later. Staying with you, Lisa, we mentioned it a moment ago, Karen was talking about it, and all 3 of us, but really to some extent, it was the PC was like the seminal technology back in the 90s. Although, Lisa, you mentioned, I believe, the World Wide Web. So, there were these waves like surfing that TechCore has, the surfboard of TechCore has navigated over 30 years. And we got the PC, we got the World Wide Web in 94. We have the cloud, we have the smartphone, we have social media, which I think is sometimes better known as unsocial media. And now we have AI and cyber. How, maybe answer it in terms of the present. How are you, as CEO of TechCore, managing the technology is out there now with an eye on the future as to what are you going to embrace as you go forward?
It's an exciting field to be in. I think Gary baked into this organization and the way that it was founded was always the flexibility to evolve as the needs evolved, right? The needs of our students, the needs of our teachers, our schools, our communities, and our employers. And I believe that one of the reasons that TechCore is still, in operation 30 years after its launch, is still relevant is because we have been responsive and we have changed as the needs have changed. And who knows where we're headed, right? I mean, I I'm so incredibly excited about the possibilities of these new technologies that are continuing to emerge and will emerge at an even faster rate, right? Than before. And I think what has allowed us to stay flexible and nimble has been baked into the DNA of who we are as an organization. It's also been driven by the board, right? And having lots of really great thinkers around the table who are constantly, questioning, this is where I see things going next. What are we going to do as an organization to make sure we're building the programs that give kids and their educators the tools they need to stay up to date with this, if not ahead of it.
Is it a dual-edged compass, so to speak, Lisa? You said kids and their educators, both of them in sync are helping you and the team and the board say, okay, this is the path we're going to go in the future? Or does one of the two, are the kids the first stop and then the teachers, or is it simultaneous? Where do you find the best looking around the corner, the next technology coming down the pike from kids or teachers?
Interesting question, Gary. I don't know that it's one or the other. I
Right.
think that the two are always in my head, right? That I always want to think about what are we doing because our model now allows us to provide direct service programs to students and also to provide educator-centered programs directly to educators in our community. And so our approach, I like that we have this dual approach. So in my mind, Gary, those two are always living. Right? I'm always thinking about how are we going to make sure that we're building programs and setting up environments that support them both.
Yeah, good point. Karen, same question. Over your 10 years as executive director, founding director, and as I mentioned in my opening comments, uh, your 20 plus years on the board, you have a good feel on the pulse of where the next big thing, the technology business is infamous for the next big thing. Um, what did you find helpful, and what could you share with our audience as to what they should be looking forward to and look for signs that say, okay, this is happening, it's real.
Well, I echo what Lisa has said. I remember, Gary, you talked about in the pre-tech core days, the switched on classroom, which was the Massachusetts Software Publishers,
Yeah.
Massachusetts Software Council's publication, uh, which was to serve as a guide to help schools do their technology and what should they do first? And this was pre-tech core days. And I remember one of the chapters at the tail end was looking forward. What should educators be concerned about looking forward? And I remember making the statement in that book that there's this thing called the World Wide Web.
Hmm.
that bears keeping an eye on for what it might offer. And oh my gosh, that seems like light years
It is
ago.
decades ago. It is.
Uh, but uh, I think that also helped to inform how we structured TechCore from the beginning, as Lisa said, positioning it as being able to evolve as the needs change. We were very proud that, and continue to be proud, that we meet the schools where they are. And if they in the early days needed help installing software, we were there. If they needed help getting on to this World Wide Web thing, if they needed help getting on to the internet, we were there. And as their capacities grew, so did our ability to match them with resources. And that's because of the breadth and depth of the technology industry that we were partnering with. Um, I personally find it very hard to predict what's coming next. I would not even begin to do that. But it's because of the way we have positioned ourselves with the technology sector that we are in a position to get a peek early on as to what's coming and have partners that could help us so that schools, so that teachers and students were not blindsided by what was coming and always having to catch up. But we're in a position to uh, anticipate and be ready when new things came on the horizon. So I don't know what's coming, but
Mm.
I do know that with our partners, we're able to meet the evolving needs of the schools.
I
Yeah.
think, Karen, too, one of the things that's always been, for a number of years in our annual meeting, we have had a facilitated conversation about what's on the horizon for the different board members based on their industry, which has always been a fascinating
Right.
discussion to have because it plants the seed in us for, oh, well, if the insurance industry is thinking about these things, how might this impact? And then how might we translate that for third graders, right? And so I always, coming out of that meeting, taking that information into our staff retreat at the beginning of the year to just say, hey, this is kind of the conversation that we had, and some of the things. What is this spark in you? That might lead to the development of the next Tech Core program. Yeah, just
Yeah, I agree. I think I find that to be a fascinating board discussion, and it reminds me each year that of the bringing together of the conversations. I think TechCore is uniquely positioned to have its finger on the pulse of the schools and the pulse of the industry and where it's going. I think that's a unique position that we continue to evolve and for the benefit of the schools.
You two ladies have led that charge for 30 years. And I think one of the greatest compliments I can give to TechCore is that you sell aspirin. And when I was in business, what I meant by that is if I have a toothache and I have an aspirin and say this is going to cure your toothache in a second, they're not going to haggle over how much does it cost versus here's a vitamin. Oh, it's nice, but if I don't take it, it doesn't make any difference. TechCore, I think, has had a unique capability because both of you, under your leaderships, have stayed close to the customer, and you've identified the pain points that those customers, whether it's partners, teachers, students, parents, administrators, politicians, you name it, you've been part of that discussion, and I'm so proud of that passion that you brought to the table. I can personally say I know where the next thing is coming from in technology, and
Tell us.
that's
I know.
oh I could ask her to come into the call right now. It's my 3.5-year-old granddaughter. If she can do it, it's time to move on to the next thing. And and she's amazing. I mean, all these kids, 3-year-olds are amazing. She can get on. Her parents have a Google Nest, and she can type, boom, boom, Google, hey Google, call Pa. There he is. Um, she has her toy phone, and it's just amazing times. Um, but moving on here, we've talked a bit about it, but Lisa, starting with you, what on your question, what barriers do you see and have seen that students who have gone through the tech core experience, what do they face in having ubiquitous access to technology, something that Karen was talking about with the cyber ed truck back in the 90s? How what barriers do you see around the country to accessing tech education?
I think um, a lot of times we have confused students being able to be good users of technology to that setting them on some type of path to becoming like the next generation of technologists that we need in this country. And I think that we have seen that that's not necessarily true. If you just mentioning about your granddaughter,
Hmm.
kids in the United States interact with their first piece of technology before their second birthday, but we're still not graduating enough computer scientists and engineers to stay competitive and to fill these jobs that we have. And so I think one of the things that we have tried to do with our tech core programs recently is really try to move kids from being passive users and consumers of technology to becoming creators and designers. Um, and I always say that even if a student that comes through Tech Core doesn't end up and decide to go in the technology industry, the things that they learn, it's so important now um, with technology to be an informed user. There's so
What do you
much
mean by
going
that?
on. I mean,
Informed in what way?
informed that you really understand when you engage with a piece of software or an app to understand what and how is that work. You don't have to know all of it, but you need to understand how it's using your information, how it's using your images. And so those are the things for the kids that come through the program that I want them to understand. And I remember, Gary, and this has probably now been about 10 years ago, one of the activities we had with students is and this was high school kids. First day they would come into the program, the assignment that we gave them leaving, they were each matched up with someone they didn't know. And we said, go home tonight and find out as much as you can about the person next to you, and then come back and tell us. And they were blown away by how much information that folks that did not know them were able to find
Wow.
in an evening.
Wow.
And not, right, these aren't advanced
Sounds
users,
like a
right?
tech core board meeting.
But I mean, and so I thought for us, so again, I think that's part of what we're thinking about in these programs that we're developing is not just, we're not in the business of trying to turn out a bunch of software engineers.
Right.
We love when our kids go on to these paths, and we know how important this early work is, but also every person now engages with technology and they need to become more informed users. And I think that they can do that through programs like ours. So I hope that answered the question.
That's good. Karen, you want to comment
No,
on
I am retired. I'm away from having my finger on the pulse of what is going on. I am an outside observer, a passionate, knowledgeable, caring, I care about. But I would really I would leave it to Lisa for her perspective on this. I know that one of the barriers continues to be how fast technology goes. You just catch up and you're behind already. And that's a challenge for schools who are not programmed that way. They're not programmed to react quickly. Um, they're programmed to react thoughtfully. and it's a challenge for schools, and the things that TechCore does, being a partner with them is incredibly important to the teachers, to the students, uh, and what they are doing. So
Yeah. And I think, Karen, I mean, to your point, that one of the things that we've been able to do as an organization is to fill in those gaps, right? That schools are tasked with so much. Teachers are asked to do so many things. And then all of a sudden we said, and now we also want you to
yeah,
teach computer
right.
science, right? We're not going to take away anything, but we're going to keep adding.
Yeah,
And it's just a lot. And while we certainly support doing everything we can to bring computer science into our schools in a way that is connected to learning, and with the supports that educators in schools need to do that, there's also a great opportunity in all of those hours where students are outside of school.
yeah.
And I think, TechCore and partnering with nonprofits and other youth serving organizations, being able to think about what are those times, whether it's after school or in the summer, that we can also get great content to students that it's going to take all of us.
Oh yeah.
It can't just be us looking to the schools and saying, you're not delivering what we need, shame on you. It's really got to be, we're all in this together and we're going to work together to get our kids where they need to be.
And that all together aspect, um, I believe I was sharing it with you, Lisa, a couple of weeks ago. But a technology vendor, an analyst vendor, did a survey of 3,000 students and parents. And the bottom line study was 91% of the students felt having some computer science curriculum experience in from kindergarten to high school, sometime during that 13 years, was vital to their role in terms of how they're going to evolve with their life. And 67% of students felt that way too. So it's really almost the golden age of TechCore going forward, because the supply and demand, the demand for the kinds of services TechCore provides is extraordinarily high. The challenge is, and this is one of the things that the organization is looking at, is how do you supply that expertise, whether it's with vendor partners or what have you.
I think one of the things that a badge that TechCore has earned over the years, and certainly under Lisa's very strong leadership, is a trusted partner. Um, and when you face the uncertainties and the speed and everything else that is coming, to have a trusted partner, whether you're an educator or whether you are a business or government leader, to have that trusted partner that you can rely on, that you will be pleased with the results that will be delivered. That trust is exceedingly important. And I think that's a badge that we have earned, that we continue to cherish and live up to.
Oh, good points. How does, Lisa, as CEO, how does TechCore measure the organization's success? Karen was talking about those badges of honor. How do you know that it's all working so well? I mean, you can look at spreadsheets, as we all do every 3 months, and the organization is doing extraordinarily well under your leadership. Yeah, but how do you personally measure the success of TechCore now and going forward?
Well, we measure success in several ways, right? I mean, certainly looking at those numbers that you mentioned on a regular basis is important to us, So we are tracking the number of students served and how we're serving them, and what do those students look like, and the same would be true, on the educators. We're setting goals based on what our data is telling us. Where are gaps in our service areas that we need to see some improvement. I'm we're an organization that spends a lot of time with data and now spending even more time with it in really making some data informed decisions about what we want to do. So that's the kind of the quantifiable side of it, Gary. And then I would say on the qualitative side, it's those students and those stories that really resonate about the impactfulness. I was at an event last week to present to a corporation who had pulled together a couple of different nonprofit organizations that they're investing in around Central Ohio, and we were just sharing our reports of some of our outcomes and our impact. And after I shared our report, they opened it up for questions, and someone in the audience said, "Well, I don't have a question, but I want to tell a story." And she ended up telling a story about her son who was in a tech core program when he was in school. And so she then told the impact of this program. And she said, "I just want to speak to this organization and the impact that it has had on his life, who, not only was he in the program in high school, once he graduated from high school and went to college, Tech Core hired him as an instructor and brought him back, and now this young man has started his own graphic marketing a firm." And so she was just saying, and I thought, that's sometimes hard to measure, but that's what it's all about, right? That at the end of the day, that we're transforming lives. And that's incredible. And the impact that those kids who are having these transformational experiences, not just on them, but how does that impact their family, their future family, their community, their, company, all of that. It just ripples out.
It's like a rock throwing into a still pond. And when we've had several of these, this is the fourth season of these podcasts, and I've been fortunate to participate in many of them, and listening to the stories that the students talk about that they experienced in a Czech Core program, but then what they've done is they've gone home and they've influenced a younger brother or older brother or sister, and it's just amazing.
Yeah.
In terms of
But
transformation.
I would add to those measures of success.
Hmm.
The stories, I think, the proof is in the pudding. You can have all the data in the world that says A plus, A plus, but it's the stories of the impact it has had that, as they say in Ohio, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
Uh, but I would also add this little perspective that over the 30 years, because we're celebrating 30 years here, some mighty fine organizations have come and gone.
Hmm.
They've had their impact and they've dissolved. The fact that TechCore has remained relevant and has remained in demand by educators says a ton about its success. And I'd also add that the continued breadth and depth of the partnerships within the corporate world is also a testament to the success and impact that TechCore has and will continue to have. Uh, Being relevant throughout 30 years, uh, being in demand across 30 years is uh, a pretty strong indicator of some success and strong results that we have achieved together.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. I
amazing.
think that sustainability, Karen, is huge. And I think, to think that we have corporate partners who have invested in our work for over 20 years
Wow.
consistently. And I think, again, to your point earlier, Karen, part of it is because we have been a trusted partner. We have been transparent. We have celebrated when things have gone well. And we have also been very upfront about when things needed to, we need to turn the corner. And I think that early on, that was something that I learned from you. in terms of, trusting your partners to have those conversations and understand that no one is always expecting perfection, right? And those are the partnerships that sustain, and those are the partnerships that have been able to grow and have significant impact because the trust was there. And I do think that's 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 some
It's
good stuff, you
too
know.
bad a magazine doesn't do corporations 30 under 30. We would have been on that list. But anyway, it is what it is. One last question to you, ladies. I know you've got to get back to work. What does you're mentioning 20 years partners, Lisa, a moment ago. Karen, I'll come to you first on this one. What's your hope for TechCore over the next decade? If we're sitting here 10 years from now, uh, what has happened?
I remember when in the early, truly founding days of TechCore, we talked about wouldn't it be great if we ultimately worked our way out of a job by solving all of the issues? Wouldn't that be great? Well, the fact that we even thought that might happen. So here we are 30 years later, we're still relevant. Um, we're trusted, we're sought after by educators and businesses because of the results we deliver. So, you know, what would I wish for in the next decade of TechCore? That we as individuals, we as an organization that is comprised of individuals, remain relevant, responsive, trusted, and making a difference in the lives of our youth, in the education of our youth, and in their lives. Um, so my hope for the next decade is, may it continue to be so.
I almost started crying listening to you. That was so nicely said. Lisa, you have last word. What's the next 10 years look like?
Karen did such an incredible job as always. I I think about um, I think about the kids that have come through, and I'm so grateful. And I was thinking about this morning. I'm so grateful that we've been doing this long enough that I remember these kids when they were in elementary school, and now I see what they're doing, and to feel like we played some part in those lives. Um, it just it gets me up every morning and it makes me want to do more. And so, I think about Gary, in the next 10 years, I want to expand, our reach and our impact. I want to make sure that the kids we're not getting to yet, that we're finding ways to do that. That I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to continue to allow kids to build skills, to increase, their confidence, and to expand their opportunities. And so I'm looking forward to continuing the great partnerships that we have, and to growing where we need to grow, to just continue to do this really great work.
And we'll end it at that, those two comments. But I must
Gary,
say,
Gary, I have to add a
well,
PS.
please go ahead.
I have to add a PS, and that is, may the organization continue to do all the wonderful things that we've just said. And may it continue to, now I am going to tear up, to thrive under the leadership of Lisa Chambers, who brings talent and passion and vision and really does put the meat on the bones of the ideals that we aspire to. And so my vision of the next 10 years has to include this wonderful lady under whom we thrive and will continue to thrive and make a difference.
Lisa is TechCore.
But
Oh, everybody's crying here. This was not in the script.
It's
But
good
I
stuff.
must say,
Good stuff. It's
just
passionate, good stuff.
I've met many people in my 40 plus years in the technology business. And at the top of that list are you two. I mean, it's just every time I speak to you guys, I get inspired. It is TechCore being involved in it now as co-chair. It's by far the most relevant thing you guys mentioned those word relevancy I've done in my life, and I thank you both for the opportunity, to be able to say that. So Lisa Chambers, Chief Executive Officer of TechCore, in terms of 30 years going forward, hopefully. Karen Smith, your passion, get the organization off the ground as the founding executive director. On the behalf of the audience who's listened to us, listened to you, both of you, talk about your passion, your vision, your commitment to making it a better world is just inspiring. For listeners who are interested in learning more about what that inspiration has gelled into in terms of TechCore, you can go to www.techcore.org. Something you couldn't do when we founded the organization 30 years ago, and learn more. So for the team at TechCore on the Founders Focus podcast series, my name is Gary Beach. Thank you both for investing your time with us today. Thank you.